Buildings remember things people forget. Hospitals remember in wires, tucked behind walls long after the rooms they serve have changed purpose entirely. Desmond Achterberg had spent 25 years learning to read the hidden memory inside Ashgrove Regional Medical Center, a hospital whose original 1966 East Wing had been quietly repurposed over the decades from patient care into administrative offices and record storage. Its old bones still wired for a job nobody in that wing did anymore. He was 59 now, facilities electrician, responsible for the building's electrical systems across both the active, humming patient wings and the older, forgotten sections that most staff walked through without a second thought. He had learned to trust the wiring's memory from a man named Otto Farrow, who had kept the hospital's electrical systems running for 23 years before him and who believed, without needing to argue the point, that a wire never truly died until someone actually cut it, no matter how long ago the room it served had stopped needing it. Desmond started at Ashgrove at 34, hired as Farrow's assistant during a period when the hospital's active wings were being upgraded faster than anyone had time to properly document. Farrow was 61 then, meticulous and unhurried, a man who traced circuits with the patient confidence of someone who had personally wired half the building over his career. A hospital never really finishes being wired, Farrow told him, during Desmond's first week, the two of them standing in the dim, quiet corridor of the old East Wing, long since converted to file storage and administrative offices. Every renovation adds wire and takes away purpose. Nobody ever goes back and pulls out what isn't needed anymore. It's cheaper to leave it dead in the wall. Except sometimes it isn't dead. It's just been forgotten. Farrow kept a small notebook, a record of a single persistent nuisance signal he'd been tracking for years. A call button activation from a now office room in the old East Wing that the modern administrative alert system occasionally still registered, decades after the room's original patient call button was supposedly disconnected during the wing's conversion. Desmond remembered the first time Farrow showed him the notebook, tapping the entry for room 214 with one finger and explaining, patiently, that most electricians would silence a nuisance alert like this permanently and move on with their week. He'd asked why Farrow hadn't done exactly that years earlier, and saved himself the trouble of logging something so minor. Farrow had closed the notebook before answering, unhurried as always, because silencing an alarm and understanding it are two different jobs, he'd said. Anybody can mute a signal. I want to know why the building's still sending one. When Farrow retired, he left Desmond the notebook, along with a piece of advice Desmond had carried for 25 years since. If a dead circuit ever wakes up, don't just silence the alert. Find out what woke it. Something's still connected that shouldn't be. Ashgrove's East Wing had opened in 1966 as a full patient care floor, complete with the era's newly modern nurse call system, a network of buttons in every room, wired back to a central annunciator panel at the nurse's station, replaced decades later by fully digital software once the hospital modernized its active wings. When the East Wing was converted to administrative use in 1988, the original call buttons were physically removed and their circuits disconnected at the panel. The wing repurposed for offices and storage without anyone tearing out the old wiring itself, buried as it was inside walls nobody had any reason to open. Desmond knew the hospital's electrical architecture the way he knew his own toolbox. He knew which breaker panel in the newer surgical wing ran warm under heavy load, and which emergency lighting circuit in the parking structure needed its battery backup tested every quarter. He knew the low, steady hum of the building's main electrical room, and the particular smell of warm insulation that told him a panel needed attention before any gauge confirmed it. And he knew, better than anyone alive, that room 214 in the old East Wing, now a record storage office, occasionally triggered a call button alert on the hospital's modern nurse call software, despite having no functioning call button at all. It wasn't frequent. Most weeks, nothing happened. The office staff who used room 214 for file storage had never once witnessed the alert trigger, since it registered only on the software's back-end alert log rather than any visible signal in the room itself. Only the on-call facility staff, monitoring the modern system's diagnostic feed, ever saw the phantom activation appear, a call from a room that, according to every piece of hardware anyone could inspect, had nothing left to call with. A younger technician on the overnight shift had once joked, half seriously, that the old wing was haunted, that some long-departed patient was still trying to reach a nurse who would never come. Desmond had laughed along at the time, but he'd also written the date of that conversation into the margin of Farrow's notebook, because the alert really had gone off again that same week. Same as it always eventually did. Farrow's earliest entry about it, dated 1994, read, Asterisk 214 rang again tonight, empty office. Disconnected button confirmed by 2 techs. Wiring traced to a dead end in the old panel. Signal originates somewhere it shouldn't be able to. Watching it, asterisk. Desmond had read that entry during his first winter with the notebook, sitting in the small electrical shop off the hospital's maintenance corridor, and it felt something settle into place that he wouldn't fully understand for years. Farrow had noticed something real. Farrow had never solved it, and Farrow had kept logging it anyway, alert after alert, patient enough to preserve a pattern he never got to finish explaining. Desmond continued the logging without ever being asked to. Every time the Phantom alert appeared on the diagnostic feed, he noted the date, the time, and whatever else seemed relevant the way Farrow had. The pattern held. Sporadic, unexplained, and never once traced to a live button anywhere in room 214. In his 11th year with the notebook, Desmond began cross-referencing something Farrow's simpler entries had never quite captured. The hospital's overall electrical load at the exact moment each Phantom alert occurred, pulled from the building's central power monitoring system. It took him nearly a decade of that cross-referencing to see what Farrow's rougher notes could only hint at. The Phantom alerts weren't random. They clustered consistently during the hospital's heaviest electrical load periods, shift changes, major equipment cycling in the surgical wings, the building's peak demand hours, and that clustering had been slowly intensifying, the alerts becoming more frequent year over year, tracking almost exactly alongside the hospital's overall growth in power demand as the facility expanded and modernized around the old, forgotten East Wing. He sat with that realization one evening in the electrical shop. Farrow's oldest notebook opened beside his own decade of cross-reference data, the building's steady electrical hum audible even through the shop's closed door. If the frequency had been climbing since Farrow's first 1994 entry, whatever was causing room 214's Phantom signal wasn't a fixed, isolated glitch. It was responding to something happening throughout the entire building's growing electrical demand, meaning the old East Wing supposedly dead, wiring was still, in some fashion, electrically present. He wrote a new entry beneath Farrow's oldest one, in the same plain hand. Asterisk 10 years of cross-reference data confirm Phantom alerts cluster with peak hospital load and are increasing in frequency year over year. The circuit is disconnected at the panel. Something is still making it live. 'Cause still unknown. Continuing to log. Asterisk. He underlined continuing. It felt like the only honest word available to him. Somewhere above the file cabinets and storage boxes of room 214, in a wall nobody in that office had any reason to think about twice, a length of 30-year-old wire was quietly reacting to hospital's own growing appetite for electricity, the building's newest equipment inadvertently waking up its oldest forgotten nerve. Desmond had a theory, in his 15th year, that the cause might simply be a software artifact in the aging nurse call database, a known category glitch in legacy hospital software, where old room identifiers sometimes generated Phantom entries as the system aged, entirely disconnected from any actual electrical signal. He spent the better part of summer working with the software vendor support team, having room 214's identifier fully purged and rebuilt in the system's database, confident he had finally found something a clean software reset could permanently resolve. The Phantom alerts returned within months, clustering during peak load exactly as his 10-year data predicted. The software rebuild had made no difference whatsoever. Whatever was generating the signal wasn't a database ghost. It was something physically, electrically real, still happening somewhere inside the old East Wing's walls. He had been wrong. He wrote it plainly in the notebook, in the same unembellished style Farrow had taught him without ever meaning to teach a lesson. Asterisk software artifact theory. Ruled out. Database fully rebuilt. Phantom alerts returned on the same load-clustered schedule. The signal is physical, not digital. Back to unexplained. Asterisk. It bothered him more than most of his wrong guesses did. He had wanted the software to be the answer. Clean, correctable with a support ticket, a summer's collaboration, and a closed question. Being wrong meant the cause lived somewhere in wiring nobody had traced completely in over 30 years. Buried inside a wing, everyone at the hospital had long since stopped thinking about it as anything other than an office building with good bones. The data infrastructure upgrade announcement arrived in its 20th year. The hospital approved a major project to route new fiber optic and power conduit through the building for a facility-wide network modernization, and the project engineers, looking for the path of least resistance through an already built structure, planned to reuse the old East Wing's original 1966 wall chases for new cabling. The same hollow spaces the original nurse call wiring had run through without fully tracing every abandoned circuit inside them first. Desmond read the project brief and felt an old unease sharpen into urgency. If a live, forgotten circuit was still running somewhere inside those wall chases, brand new high-capacity fiber and power cabling was about to be installed directly alongside it. Inside walls that hadn't been individually inspected wire by wire in decades, based on drawings that already hadn't accounted for whatever was still causing room 214's phantom alert. He brought Farrow's notebook, along with his own decade of load correlation data, to the IT infrastructure contractor overseeing the cabling project. The contractor, a capable and straightforward man named Reginald Voss, reviewed the original 1966 electrical drawings and the 1988 disconnection work order alongside Desmond's data at a folding table set up in the old East Wing's corridor. The work order confirms room 214's call button circuit was properly isolated at the panel. Voss said, tracing the documentation with one finger, if it's disconnected at the source, it shouldn't be able to generate anything downstream. My honest read is a software theory you already investigated. Legacy hospital call systems are notorious for ghost artifacts in the alert database. I know you rebuilt it once, but these things can be stubborn. Either way, it's not something our fiber routing through the existing chases should interact with. I already ruled out the software, Desmond said. Full database rebuild. Phantom alerts came back on the exact same load-clustered schedule within months. This isn't a database ghost. Something in that wall is still physically connected to the building's power, even though the work order says it was cut. I don't know how, but the pattern's been getting worse for 30 years, and it's tracking the hospital's overall power growth almost exactly. Voss considered that, and to his credit, didn't dismiss it. I don't have another explanation for a correlation like that, but a signed disconnection work order doesn't give me grounds to individually trace every abandoned wire in those chases before running new fiber through them. The project scope is installing new infrastructure using the existing pathways, not an open-ended audit of 30-year-old wiring. It was a reasonable position, and Desmond didn't have an electrical engineering credential to argue against it. What he had was 30 years on alert that had survived a full software rebuild, and a growing conviction that a signed work order confirming a disconnection wasn't the same as confirming every inch of wire behind that disconnection had actually gone quiet. Desmond didn't sleep well through the weeks that followed. He kept circling back to a question he couldn't put down. What if Voss was right, and 30 years of tracking amounted to nothing more than a stubborn legacy software quirk his own rebuild simply hadn't fully cured? A pattern he and Farrow, between them, had slowly turned into an electrical mystery through nothing but 2 careers of inherited suspicion? He had wanted, for years, for the load-clustered pattern to mean something physically real. Wanting it to matter wasn't the same as it actually mattering. He pulled Farrow's 1994 notebook out one more evening and reread the entry under the electrical shop's single desk lamp. Asterisk signal originates somewhere it shouldn't be able to. Watching it, asterisk. Farrow had never known the cause either. He had simply kept watching, alert after alert, trusting that the pattern was worth preserving even without an explanation attached. Desmond had inherited that trust without ever fully testing whether it would stand against a signed work order and a reasonable contractor's project scope. He didn't have the cause confirmed. But not having it hadn't stopped Farrow from writing the first entry in 1994, and it wasn't a reason for Desmond to stop now. Not with new fiber and power cabling about to run through a wall chase his own decade of data said was still hiding something live. He requested, at his own initiative, a single day with an electrical forensics specialist before the new cabling installation began. Not to delay the project, he made clear only physically trace room 214's original wiring path before new cable ran alongside whatever was still there. The specialist was a woman named Priya Anand, who traced abandoned electrical circuits in older commercial and institutional buildings using specialized signal tracing equipment. She reviewed the 1966 electrical drawings and the 1988 disconnection work order alongside Desmond's decade of load correlation data, and she spent a morning in the old East Wing's wall chase with a handheld signal tracer, following room 214's original call button wire from its dead end at the disconnected panel toward the room itself. What she found, roughly two-thirds of the way along the original run, explained 30 years of phantom alerts that nobody had ever been able to fully name. The work order says this circuit was disconnected at the panel, and it was, Priya said, showing Desmond her tracer's readout at a small table set up in the corridor. But whoever did that disconnection in 1988 only cut the wire at the panel end. They never cut at the far end, down here near the room. That leaves this whole length of original signal wire still physically attached to the building's old signal bus at this end, insulated well enough that it never caused an obvious fault. But it's just sitting here, live at one end, dead at the other, doing nothing most of the time. Then why does it alert? Desmond asked. Because it's close enough to newer power runs that got added near it over the decades, Priya said. Every renovation since 1988 has added more conduit through the same chase. During your hospital's heaviest load periods, current in those newer lines induces a faint signal into this old abandoned wire through simple electromagnetic coupling. Enough, apparently, to register as a phantom call on your modern software, which still recognizes this room's old identifier somewhere in its legacy configuration. As more high-load circuits got added near over the years, the coupling got a little stronger. That's your growing frequency. Priya's findings went to the Infrastructure Project Committee within the week. Reginald Voss reviewed her signal tracing report personally and called Desmond afterward. "You were right to push for this," Voss said. "The work order told the truth about the panel end. It just never occurred to anyone that the other end of that wire was never actually cut. If we'd run new high-capacity fiber and power cable directly alongside that live stub without finding it, we have risked introducing real interference into modern hospital systems sharing that same chase, probably intermittent and maddening to diagnose, in a wing nobody would have thought to suspect." The installation plan was revised. Room 214's original signal wire was properly located and cut at both ends, fully removing it from the building's electrical environment before any new fiber or power conduit was run through the same chase. The infrastructure upgrade proceeded afterward, installed alongside wiring that had finally been made as dead as the 1988 paperwork had always claimed it already was. Ashgrove Regional Medical Center filed a formal note in its facilities archive, crediting both Otto Farrell's original 1994 observation and Desmond's 25 years of continued tracking as the reason a hidden live circuit had been found and properly removed before new infrastructure ran directly alongside it. Desmond kept Farrell's notebook. He added a final entry beneath the oldest one before moving it into the hospital's permanent archive. Asterisk room 214 signal wire located and cut at both ends this year. Origin traced to an incomplete 1988 disconnection, documented informally through phantom low-clustered alerts since 1994. First season on record with 0 activations. Otto, you were right. Nothing's really dead in these walls until somebody actually cuts it. Neither of us knew what was still connected for a very long time. Asterisk. He walked past room 214 on a quiet afternoon not long after, glancing at the diagnostic feed on his phone out of habit. No alert, no flicker of activity from a room that had, for 30 years, occasionally reached out to a system that no longer had any reason to expect it. He thought about Farrow, standing in the same corridor decades earlier, telling a nervous new hire that a hospital never really finishes being wired, that it's cheaper to leave dead circuits in the wall than to pull them out properly. Desmond had carried that sentence through 25 years, through a ruled-out software theory, through a season of real doubt about whether 2 careers of quiet tracking had amounted to anything more than habit. He hadn't needed to understand the cause immediately. He had only needed to keep watching, the way Farrow had taught him, until the building finally admitted exactly what had still been connected, all along, inside a wing everyone else had long since stopped thinking about.